Happy Sabbath. Well, it's been a while since we started this series on Lord Save Our Children. We had 4 of them already, and this is the 5th. The first one was Lord Save Our Children. The first one was just Lord Save Our Children. When he talked about Abraham not being mature enough to have children when he was over 80 years old, he was not going to be able to take care of a child because he still believed in his strength to find solutions for the fulfillment of God's promises. So he needed to wait for 15 more years to actually have the child of the promise. And we concluded that all our children have a purpose, and God brought them into the world for a reason. And we need to be up to the challenge so that our children can actually fulfill the purpose God has for them. And then the second study was Lord, save our children before they are born. We talked about the influence the parents have on a child before they are even born and how we are supposed to get ready before they come, so that we are not surprised when they are in our arms and ask, Lord, what am I going to do with this child? We are supposed to know beforehand. And the third study was Lord, save our children when they are small, how important it is for us to take care of our children in the first years of life so that they could become something great, could fulfill the purpose God has for them. And the fourth was Lord, save our children when they are teenagers. And we talked about how our children lose interest in family relationship, how they lose interest in church when they get to the teenage years, how they seem to die because they don't speak anymore, they want to spend time in bed, sometimes they don't feel like coming to church anymore, right? So we talked about how we can deal with that. And today we'll talk about Lord, save our children when they are lost. And as I was preparing the study, there were so many thoughts coming to my mind that I decided to actually divide this study into 2 parts. And we are going to have another study on Lord, save our children. And I would like to read in Isaiah 27:3. Speaking about his vineyard, the Lord says, I, the Lord, do keep it. I will water it every moment, lest any hurt it. I will keep it night and day. Now, we know that the vineyard is a symbol of God's church, but today I want to apply it to his dear youth, our children. The promise here is that the Lord is the one who keeps our young people, right? You know, I always say if it weren't for God and for my wife, I don't know where my children would be now, when you consider the amount of time I was gone from home. And it's just a miracle that my children are still in the church. He says, I will water it every moment. That means constantly. God takes care of our young people constantly. And then he says, lest any hurt it, I will keep it night and day. So there is a possibility for someone to hurt our youth. And it is God who keeps them. So today we are going to talk about the beautiful promises that God has for us regarding the salvation of our children. But we are also going to talk about what can hurt. Why would God consider the possibility of our young people, of his vineyard, getting hurt? And the question we are going to address, is it only the world that can hurt our children? or we ourselves can hurt our children in such a way that one day they could lose their faith. So the two parts of the study are going to be, Lord, save our children when they are lost in the church. And the second part is going to be, Lord, save our children when they are lost in the world. So today, we are going to talk about, Lord, save our children when they are lost in the church. You know, you probably never thought of the possibility of our children being in the church and still being lost. You know, some time ago I told you a story about this lady who expressed concern about her 17-year-old son who had no interest in the church. So she invited me to go and have a study, to go and invite him to the study. So, amazingly, he came this time. And I don't know why, the Lord impressed me to talk about the inspiration of the spirit of prophecy. For some reason, it's not a study that you usually give to a young person who loses interest in the church, but that was the study that I had. And actually, my wife was with me. It was some time ago. He was 17 years old. So we had the study, and at the end of the study, he said, wow, I heard that they were Adventists. And he said, I've heard of Ellen Joy, but I never knew she was a prophet. And he asked whether she had any books written. So I said, yes, she has. And actually, I will give you one of her books. It is called Messages to Young People. And as I was talking to him and promising him to give him the book, I heard the mom behind saying to somebody else, look, he is confusing my child. She was the one who invited me to speak, to help save her son. And now she says he is confusing him. So I went and talked to her, and I said, what did you mean by that? She said, well, I thought you were going to do enough to bring him back to the church. I didn't know you were going to bring him so profoundly into reading and into studying, because if he gets to study so profoundly, he is going to change dramatically, and then he is going to ask me to change as well. And specifically, she mentioned that he is not going to eat meat anymore, and he is going to ask me not to eat meat anymore. So she was concerned about her son, but I came to the conclusion that what she was more concerned about was her reputation in the church. Because probably people would ask her, where is your son? How come your son is not here? How come you talk about the truth, but your son is not touched by this truth? So she decided that she would recover her reputation by bringing her son back to the church. So she asked whoever she could to help her son go back to the church, but she didn't actually want her son to be saved. She wanted her son to still be lost, but simply be lost in the church. Because reputation was more important than her son. Let's consider the lost coin, the parable of the lost coin, just very shortly. It says in Luke chapter 15, verse 8, what woman, having 10 pieces of silver, if she lose one piece, does not light a candle and sweep the house and seek diligently, the key word here is diligently, till she find it? And in Christ Object Lesson, it explains the lost coin represents those who are lost in trespasses and sins, but who have no sense of their condition. They are estranged from God, but they know it not. Their souls are in peril, but they are unconscious and unconcerned. Again, the key word here is unconcerned. Now, the coin was lost in the house. And it says that it represents those who are sinners, but they do not know. They are lost, but they are not conscious of them being lost. And this is how I would describe the young people who are maybe born in the truth, they grew up in the church, they are lost, but in their concept, just because they are in the church, and as long as they keep attending the church, they are what? They are saved, they are okay, they are fine. And most of the young people got inspired to believe that by us, right? By us insisting so much on the importance of them coming to church, but not much in the importance of them being dedicated to God while coming to church. The important thing many times for us is for them to come to church. But we are not diligent in helping them understanding what it means to be given to God, to be dedicated to God. We bring them up in a superficial way, and we give them the impression that as long as they come to church, they are okay. And it is true that by them coming to church, they have a chance to hear one word here, one word there, and in the end, maybe make a decision. It's more important for them to be in the church than not come to church, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing for us as parents is to make sure that they get the message. They get to have an experience with the Lord Jesus Christ. And this is where diligence comes in. Be diligent to know, another verse that we will mention, be diligent to know the state of your flocks, the Bible says. Be diligent, don't be superficial. Don't consider them coming to church as being the only thing you are concerned about. And let's talk about the curious case of Demas in the Bible. Because this is a good example of what it means to be in the church and still be worldly or love the world. Now, in Philemon chapter 24, Demas is being mentioned among others as being the fellow laborers with Paul. He was one of Paul's co-laborers. And then he writes from prison to Timothy, and he says, "For Demas has forsaken me, having loved this present world, and is departed unto Thessalonica." And it is not mentioned in the Bible that Demas had left the church. I think if he had left the church, it would have been mentioned. It only says that he loved the world, and because of the love for the world, he had forsaken Paul in his missionary trips. Paul was forsaken. And if you read more verses here in 2 Timothy chapter 4, you realize that Paul, from prison, he was still directing the work of the young missionaries. He was mentioning that one of the missionaries is in this place, the other missionary is in the other place. And then he concluded that Demas forsook me. He is not in the missionary field. He actually returned to Thessalonica. So Paul calls leaving the church, leaving the work or losing the enthusiasm for saving the lost, for saving the world, he calls it love for the present world. And then, in the same chapter, a little bit earlier, he actually brings an illustration of contrast between what it means to love the Lord and what it means to love the world. And he says here, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day. And not to me only, but unto all of them also that love his appearing." So he says, Demas has forsaken me. And then beforehand he presents what Demas had actually forsaken, right? So Demas had forsaken the life that Paul was living. The life that Paul describes as a fight, fight of the faith. It was keeping the faith, awaiting a crown of righteousness that would be given to him, not in this life, but when? In the life to come, it will be given to him and to all those who love what? The appearing of the Lord. A crown that would be given to him at the appearing of the Lord. So Paul is saying in reality here that this life is a life of what? Is a life of fight, right? Fight the good fight of faith. It's a life where you struggle to keep the faith, right? It's not a life of ease. And then he says that he does all of this in the hope that he will receive a crown. When? At the Lord's appearing. So Demas decided that that kind of life, a life of fighting the good fight of faith, was too hard for him. So what did he do? What did Demas do? He chose the immediate, he chose the attractive, he chose the contemporary, and he chose the secular, right? So he chose the immediate pleasure. He didn't want to wait until he will receive a crown at the Lord's appearing. He wanted to have a good life already. Is that wrong? No. But when you consider what he had been called to be and giving up on his calling, he decided, in other words, he decided not to be enthusiastic, not to go out and give himself sacrifice for the salvation of others. He decided to have a life of ease. He decided to have a comfortable life. He decided to have an attractive life. He decided to enjoy the contemporary, which means whatever the other young people were enjoying, he wanted to enjoy. He didn't want to be on trips all the time with Paul. He said, there are so many young people who are in the church. They are okay. They have other professions. They have money. They have a joyous life. I want to have that kind of a life. Be in the church, but not be what the Lord wants me to be really. But be in the church. Make my parents happy. I will do the minimum that is required for me not to lose my membership, right? Now, when I say what I say, it's after many years of working with the young people. I'm not talking about those who are here present. I know you make exceptions. I know you are different, you are special. I'm talking about what I hear from young people. I've been hearing it for many years. And I know what's going on in many young people's lives. And secular, he chose the secular. He didn't want to be a missionary. He wanted to have another profession that would bring benefits, immediate benefits, not at the Lord's appearing. What do I do with the benefits at the Lord's appearing, right? So what he did was, I'm going to enjoy life, and hopefully the Lord is going to save me. Just like he saved Lot. Didn't the Lord save Lot? Didn't he? He did. After he took all his family to Sodom, after risking his family, Lot was still saved, right? He made wrong choices, but he was saved. So Demas probably thought, I would have the same, I would enjoy life, and then in the last moment, the Lord is going to send his angels to save me. That might be the case, but is it risky? What do you think? It is risky. So when you, as a young person, know you are called by God for higher grounds, you decide to be satisfied with lower grounds, do you run the risk of being lost? What do you think? There is a risk, right? God calls you to be something, you decide to be something else. He wants you to be the maximum, but you want to be okay. You want just to be okay, to be enough so your parents don't get discouraged, and so the church should not disfellowship you. That's all. That's all you want from your life. The rest, immediate, attractive, contemporary, and secular. That's what I want to be. I want to enjoy all of this, and then the Lord in His mercy is going to save me because I never left the church. I stayed in the church. I'm not like the others who leave the church. He chose that over challenging circumstances. That's what happens when you dedicate yourself to God. You risk your life, you risk your comfort, you want to save others. You don't have a life of ease. He chose the other life, the comfortable life, instead of fighting the good fight of faith. He decided to keep the faith, but in a monotone manner, not enthusiastic, not having to go through difficulties. Keep the faith, but just like everybody else does. When you know God called you for more than that. So we have no record of Demas leaving the church. He was a lost coin, right? He was lost. And the only one who knew him diligently could notice his departure from his calling. And who was that? Paul. Probably nobody else noticed that Demas was loving the world. No, Demas was a great young man. He was still in the church. How can you say he loved the world? Well, loving the world doesn't mean smoking and drinking. It simply means loving the comfort of the world, loving the secular, loving the present world, not risking your life for the life to come, right? The piece of silver was lost where? In the house. It was close at hand, yet it could be recovered only by diligent search. Lost in the house. Where? At hand. What does that mean? I mean, as close as you just stretching out your arm and touching them, feeling them. This is how far lost youth could be. How far? Right here. Some of the youth could be lost already. And how do we recover them? Only by diligent search. What does diligent search mean? It means to really know our young people. Not knowing them by saying hi and bye. No. As I was preparing this study, I was working on it here at the office. I went home and I gave strong hugs to my children. Because as I was studying, I started missing them more than I did before. Because you realize that you think you know them. You know how they dress. You know how they speak. You know how they do things, but you don't really know them. You don't know why they speak as they speak. You don't know why they dress as they dress. You don't know why they do what they do. You just know what they do. Should we limit to that? If we do, we don't even know that they might be lost. Because we do not know what's behind what they show, right? I don't know. I wish I could engrave it into our hearts, I could engrave some words that would remind us of how we have to deal with our youth, with our children. In this parable of the lost coin, Christ teaches that even those who are indifferent to the claims of God are the objects of his pitying love. They are to be sought for, that they may be brought back to God. Now, did you ever see an indifferent young person in the church? Did you ever see indifferent young people in the church? I've seen a lot of them. They are not here, right? They are not here. In other parts, wherever I travel, indifferent to the claims of God. Even those are the subject of God's care. And he wants to bring them back to himself. What do we do when we see indifferent young people? What do we do? Well, let me tell you what we do sometimes. Not always, and like I said, it's not the case of this church, it's the case of other churches. Okay? We see an indifferent young man or young lady. What do we do? We say to our children, don't get close to that young person. This is what we do. You see that young man or that young lady? You see how they dress? You see how indifferent they are? If you go close, if you get friends with them, you are going to be affected by them. So get away. But even those God wants to rescue. How will God rescue them? If we get away from them. Now I believe that our children can be used by God to bring others back to himself. Do you believe that? No. And I also believe that the solution, I know our young people are not supposed to go in bars and disco bars and risk their spirituality by mingling with the world. No. But God brings some souls into our church. He brings some people into our attention. Why? Why would he bring a worldly person into my church? Why would he? Because he knows that I might be an instrument to bring them back to God. And I believe we have to invest more in our children, in our young people, to strengthen them so much that they would be an influence in bringing the worldly or the indifferent back to God, rather than separating our children from those who are different from them. We'd rather help them become missionaries to bring them back. This parable has a lesson for families. In the household, there is often great carelessness concerning the souls of its members. Among their number may be one who is estranged from God. But how little anxiety is felt lest in the family relationship there be lost one of God's entrusted gifts. So it's not only in the church, but in the family. There might be some of our children that are lost. They have worldly thoughts. They have worldly plans. Some of them maybe think, I can't wait to be 18 so I can get out of this house and make my own life. Maybe some of them say, well, I don't, if I will be a Christian, I don't want to be a Christian like my parents are. I want to be a different kind of a Christian. I don't want to live my parents' life. Again, it's not the case of young people here, but I've met a lot of families, a lot of parents coming and saying, Pastor, please, please save my son. Please save my children. I didn't know they had those thoughts. I didn't know they were planning this. I didn't know they were, they suddenly left home. They suddenly left the church. I didn't expect it to happen. They were singing in the church. They were telling poems. They were reading the Bible. They were in the church. I didn't expect them to think about that. I didn't expect them to plan to leave the church. I didn't know. Well, why don't we know? Why don't we know? Our children are not lost the moment they leave the church. They are lost before they leave the church. And as long as we have them here, it is our duty. It is our sacred duty to be diligent in searching and finding them. Be diligent. Sit with them on the bed at night. Talk to them. Even if they are not small anymore. Go into details. Ask them questions. Relate to them. And you will be amazed how they will open their hearts when they know that you are not there to find out their secrets so you can get mad and punish them. When they know you are there because you want to understand them, because you want to help them, they will open their hearts. And they will tell you their secrets. They will tell you their thoughts. And you will be able to help them. When you are diligent, you will find them. We have the tendency to express concern regarding those who are not our immediate responsibility, right? We notice the youth from the world and we initiate a rescue mission on their behalf while we neglect the youth from our own church. Why? Because they are in the church, right? They are saved already. So we go and look for those who are not saved. They are not lost in the world, but they might be lost in the church. So what do? We have a lot of rescue missions to go and seek the lost in the world. But we may miss the lost in the church. They may come with us, they may play instruments, they may sing, but we are not diligent enough to know their real state. Sometimes we express concern regarding our children, regarding the children of other families in the church. We initiate a rescue mission on their behalf while we neglect the children in our own household. So what does that mean? We see somebody behave in a way and we say, wow, my children are not like that. So what do? When I say express concern, Sister White calls it sometimes gossip. When you express concern, that means you go to somebody else and you say, wow, did you see that girl? Did you see this family's daughter, how she behaves? Or did you see that boy, how he behaves? Oh, man. They are lost. We take our children away from them. Don't get friends with them. We isolate them, right? And we say, they are like this. Again, this doesn't happen here, right? This makes an exception. Proverbs 27:23 says, be thou diligent to know the state of whose flocks? Whose flocks? Your own flocks. And look well to whose herds? Thy herds. Those who are your immediate responsibility. Now, Sister White had a dream once. You know it very well. But some of it says this. Some of the nice large berries had fallen to the ground and were half consumed by worms and insects. Oh, thought I, if this field had only been entered before, all this precious fruit might have been saved. But it is too late now. I will, however, pick these from the ground and see if there is any good in them. So what happened? She speaks about the berries that were where? Far away? No, she talks about the berries that were close. It says that the group of people who were collecting berries, they went far away to look for berries, but they neglected the berries that were where? Close by. So she decided to gather the berries that were close by. And among the berries that were close by, she found very beautiful ones. And then some of them had been on the ground, fallen, some of them half eaten by worms. They were stepped on, and she said, wow, this is too late. But maybe not. Maybe there are some who can still be rescued. What did she do? She did not run away from them. She picked them, hoping that there might still be something good in them. And I believe. Again, I don't believe in us going into the world to save the world. No. I mean, becoming like the world so we can save the world. But when we have young people among us who are affected by one thing or another, they are hurt, as it says. The vineyard is hurt, right? They might be hurt for one reason or another. They are spiritually declining, maybe. So instead of expressing concern to somebody else about that person, why wouldn't we go to the person and try to save the person? Now, I know why. I know why. It's right here. Let me see if I can find it. No, I will have that later. Let me actually read it now. It says, he only whose heart is filled with love and sympathy will be able to reach those youth who are apparently careless and indifferent. Now, this is what I wanted to read. So why don't we go straight to that person? And why do we express concern to somebody else? And say, oh, look at that person. Man, she needs salvation. Let's do something to save her. You know, sometimes it happens this way. Oh, look at that person. That person needs to be disfellowshipped. Let's disfellowship that person. Oh, but wait a minute. We cannot disfellowship the person unless we make the necessary steps. So let's make the necessary steps so we can disfellowship them the right way. Is that how we should do it? No, brethren. Disfellowshipment should not be the motor that drives us into talking to our young people, into getting friends with our young people. No. The motive should be salvation. And the first thought that comes to our mind should not be disfellowshipment. No. Because then, whatever happens in our process, we'll always look forward to the disfellowshipment. Because we've already made up our minds that that person deserves to be disfellowshipped. He says that only those who are really concerned about the situation of that person, only those who are filled with sympathy and love for that person can rescue the person. But since we know we don't have it, what do? We talk to somebody else about it. At least, we save the church from them by disfellowshipping them, right? At least we save our own children by disfellowshipping that other person. Again, that doesn't happen here, but I've heard it too many times. A lot of our young people, those who are indifferent and careless, a lot of them, brethren, do not start out of the blue. No. They've been hurt. They've been hurt some way or another. A lot of youth change when they move out of their household, right? So, and I know a lot of them because like I travel around the world, and I know many of the young people from Romania went to different countries to work, and I was amazed because I knew them when they were in Romania. When I went to Spain or when I went to Italy, I saw that they were totally different. And I thought, what happened to these young people? So I said, my conclusion back then was, well, they were always worldly, but they didn't have the environment where they could develop the worldliness. So they went out of the house and they became what they really were, what they were always. But now, brethren, I think differently. Why wouldn't I think that they went out of their house, they didn't have their parents' support anymore? Well, the parents probably neglected to prepare them for life of independence, of freedom, right? They went out of the house, they didn't know what to do, and they got lost. Not that they were always worldly, but because they were not ready to face the circumstances of life. And that might be the case of our children. What will they do when we will not be there? For them to ask questions? What will we do when we will not be there to support them, to pray with them? Are they ready? You know, I love it when young people go out of the house. They go to work, they do whatever they do, but they remain the same. It is because they received the right education at home. Families move away from one region to another because their children are being affected by liberalism, right? Have you ever heard people say, man, I had to get out of that region with my children because they were being affected by liberalism? Have you ever heard that? Yes, I've heard it. You know, there are different places where, again, you know, young people are hurt for some reasons. Some of them are liberal. So parents who are conservative, they see the danger of their young people being affected by liberalism, so they decide to move to another region, right? And they move to another region because their children were being marginalized because they were too old-fashioned. I mean, they were dressing differently. They were not so modern as those in those churches, right? So the young people in the church who were more modern said, look at you, man. You are dressing like in the 1800s, right? So the parents decided that they would not let their children be mocked, and they moved to a place where people were how? More conservative, right? So what happens when they get to that place? They are being marginalized. Why? Because they are too modern now. Sometimes our children are like facing this sign here. So what do they do? What do they do? You know, should I stop? Should I enter or not enter, right? They don't know. I mean, some people say different things to them. Or this. They get to an intersection, somebody says stop. Somebody says don't go to the left. Another one says don't go to the right. Cannot go back, you cannot go forward. So you are stuck. I don't want to end in a negative note. You know, I cry sometimes. You know, we go to places and we see young people going through a lot. And sometimes I'm thinking, you know, we need a lot of education for parents. in how to deal with their children. We need a lot of education for leaders of the church to know how to deal with the young people in the church, as much as we need seminars for the young people. Do you agree with me? Amen. We need just as many seminars for parents and leaders of the church as we need for young people. I believe many of our young people would have been rescued, those who are lost already, if we just knew better how to deal with them. Many would have been rescued. And I go to places where there is gap of generations in the church. Whole generations are lost. Why? The parents didn't know the state of their flocks. And I want to say one more thing. Even though we look at children of ministers as being favored with the minister at home, I want to tell you something. They are the ones who probably suffer the most. Everybody requires the maximum from them because they are ministers' children, right? Let me tell you this. They are still children. They are ministers' youth, but they are still youth. They are not special. If anything, they have a disadvantage. First of all, because their parents, their dads are away from home a lot of time. And secondly, because they are always under the radar of the church members. They are under the radar of everybody and says, how come you, a child of a pastor? It required a lot from them. I used to believe that the only reason ministers' children are lost is because the father neglects them. But now I believe that together with that, ministers' children are lost also because of the way they know the church looks at them, just because they are children of ministers. Let me read this again. The youth need more than a casual notice, more than an occasional word of encouragement. They need painstaking, prayerful, careful labor. He only whose heart is filled with love and sympathy will be able to reach those youth who are apparently careless and how apparently, right? They seem to be, but in reality, in their hearts they are hurt. There is something going on in their lives which we do not know. Not all can be helped the same way. God deals with each according to his temperament and character, and we must cooperate with him. Often, those whom we pass with indifference, just because of the way they look like, because we judge them from the outward appearance, have in them the best material for workers and will repay all the efforts bestowed on them. There must be more study given to the problem of how to deal with the youth, more earnest prayer for the wisdom that is needed in dealing with minds. Now, in my experience, after I read this, thankfully I read it many years ago, after I read this, I decided, when I went to mission trips, especially young people's conventions, I decided that I would look around and I would see a young person who seemed careless, and that I would focus my efforts on that specific person, the person that would call my attention in the most negative way possible, right? So every time I would go to a conference, I would look around, and there were young people who were dressed, in black, in black suits, black ties. You would think that those are the ones who are already on the way to heaven, right? But then I saw those who had, draggy jeans, or baggy jeans, and, being careless, and the hat twisted around. And, you see those ones who seem to be careless. And I decided that I would focus on those. Now, let me tell you this, no personal merit, but some of those are now Bible workers. Amen. They are Bible workers. Why? Because behind what they show, there is the best material for workers. If they only had the environment they needed to grow, they would be workers. But they didn't. They had careless parents, or the parents were busy working. Who knows what it is? They hurt inside. But beneath there is gold. There is precious metal that would come out and spring into life eternal, and could spring into ministers and Bible workers. But what do we do sometimes? We just categorize them and say, don't touch those. They are dangerous. They are worldly. The day I was ordained, I was given a very difficult church to pastor. And the pastor who was pastoring that church before came to me with a list of 9 names of 9 young persons from the church. And he said, everything is settled, everything is done, they are ready to be disfellowshipped. And I humbly said, I don't want to start my ministry by disfellowshipping young people. I'd suggest that since you started this work, you disfellowship them, and then I promise to work to bring them back. So I went to that church. The brethren came to me and said, they gave me the same list and said, these are the 9 names that we are ready to disfellowship. And I said, brethren, give me some time. So I went there. I got to know them. I visited them. We prayed together. We cried together. We studied together. Took me about 9 months. 6 of them were recovered. By diligent study, diligent seeking after them, 6 of them were saved. 3 of them were invited to the committee. In the committee, appeals were made. 2 of them decided to repent. Only 1 was disfellowshipped. No personal merit. That was just the beginning of my ministry. I began it that way. And I want to continue it that way. Let me read this again. I, the Lord, keep it. I will water it every moment, lest any hurt it. I will keep it night and day. And how many of us are happy that this parable ends like this? Aren't we happy? Brethren, we shouldn't be happy when people are disfellowshipped, saying, well, now the church is clean. We should be happy when that lost soul in the church is found. And bring everybody and let's rejoice. Because that lost young person in the church was found. Where? In the same place where he or she was lost. Is found and rescued and is now a Bible worker and is now a minister, it's a missionary, whatever it is. let's be joyful and rejoice in that.
When the sky is veiled and the wind is high, when the shadows